Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into, well, a really vital, but sometimes overlooked, player in your body, potassium.
That's right. K plus step. We hear a lot about sodium, sure, but potassium getting out of whack, that can have some serious, immediate effects.
Absolutely critical for life. So our mission today is to unpack a key chapter from Boron and Boulpaep's Medical Physiology, chapter 37, all about how your body handles potassium.
Yep. We're going to break down some pretty dense stuff, complex physiology, but making clear, hopefully engaging, and totally accessible without needing any diagrams in front of you.
Think of this as your audio guide, your shortcut to really getting a grip on potassium homeostasis.
And it's a vital shortcut, honestly, because potassium, see, it's mostly an intracellular ion. 98% of it is tucked away inside your cells.
Which is totally different from sodium, right? Sodium's mainly outside.
Exactly. And the body keeps the potassium level outside the cells in your plasma in this incredibly tight range. We're talking 3.5 to 5.0 millimolar. Tiny window.
Why so tight?
Because if it strays even a little bit, uh-oh, you get severe, potentially life-threatening problems, especially, and this is key, for your heart.
Okay, so let's back up. Why hoard all that potassium inside the cells? What's it doing in there?
Oh, a ton of things. It's crucial for keeping the right cell volume, stops them from swelling or shrinking. It helps regulate the pH inside the cell, and loads of enzymes need it to work properly.
Enzymes involved in basic stuff.
Yeah, like DNA and protein synthesis, cell growth, you name it. But it's not just about the inside. That huge difference in concentration lots inside, very little outside, creates an electrical gradient across the cell membrane.
Ah, the membrane potential.
Precisely. That gradient is pretty much the reason your cells, especially nerves and muscles, can have a resting electrical charge and fire off signals. It's fundamental.
And that brings us straight to the clinical side, which is, well, pretty dramatic. If you just double or even have that normal plasma K+, so things can go sideways fast.
They really can. Skeletal muscle problems, yes, but the heart is exquisitely sensitive.
Okay, let's paint a picture. What happens with high potassium hyperkalemia?
Right. So as plasma K+ climbs, the heart's electrical system gets sluggish, then unstable. On an ECG, you start seeing changes. First, the T wave gets tall and pointy. Tented is the word often used.
Okay.
Then, as it gets worse, the P wave, that first little blip, might flatten out and just disappear. The QRS complex, the big spike showing the main contraction, gets wider and wider.
And the really dangerous part.
At really high levels, like maybe 10 millimolar, the whole thing can degrade into this awful sine wave pattern. That's basically a prelude to ventricular fibrillation, the heart just quivering uselessly, life-threatening.
Wow. And low potassium hypokalemia, also bad.
Also bad, just different effects. The ECG might show a longer QT interval, the T wave can flatten out, and sometimes you see this extra little bump called a U wave. It points to problems with the heart resetting itself electrically.
And it's not just the heart, right? You mentioned other issues.
Yeah, chronic low potassium can mess with your kidney's ability to concentrate urine, make you prone to metabolic alkalosis, that's an acid-based problem, and affect how your kidneys handle ammonia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, keeping K+ levels right is crucial system-wide.
Okay, so the body has these two main ways of thinking about balance, right? External and internal.
Exactly. External balance is simple, conceptually. It's about matching your intake to your output. You eat, say, 80 to 120 millimoles of potassium a day.
Which is actually more than what's floating around in your entire extracellular fluid.
Right. Seems like a lot. So you've got to get rid of about the same amount. Most of it, 90 and 95%, goes out through the kidneys. A little bit, maybe 5–10%, exits via the colon. The kidney's ability to adjust that output is absolutely central.
And internal balance.
That's all about where the potassium is inside cells versus outside. And this is incredibly sensitive. Remember, 98% is inside.
Yeah.
Get this. If just 1% of all that intracellular potassium suddenly shifted out into the extracellular fluid, that would cause something like a 50% jump in your plasma potassium.
Whoa. Just 1%.
Yeah. Instant, severe neuromuscular problems. It shows you how vital keeping that potassium locked inside the cells really is, like a tiny leak from a huge dam causing a massive flood downstream.
That really puts it in perspective. So when you eat that potassium-rich meal, what happens first? It doesn't just go straight to the kidneys.
No, that would be too slow and potentially dangerous. The body has a rapid buffering system. About 80% of the potassium you ingest gets temporarily shifted into your cells, usually within maybe an hour or so.
Ah, so the cells soak it up first.
Exactly. It prevents a dangerous spike in your blood levels. Then, much later, the kidneys gradually work to excrete the excess, pulling it back out of the cells over time.
And what drives that initial shift into cells?
Three main hormones act like the first responders. Insulin, epinephrine acting via beta-adrenergic receptors, and aldosterone.
How do they do it?
They all rev up the NK pump. That's the pump found in basically all cells that pushes sodium out and pulls potassium in. It's what creates that gradient in the first place.
So if you lack insulin, like in diabetes, or have adrenal issues affecting aldosterone,
Then your ability to handle a sudden potassium load is compromised. You're much more prone to hyperkalemia after eating potassium. These hormones are like the emergency crew getting K+ safely indoors until the kidneys, the long-term solution, can handle it.
makes sense. And this internal shift, it's not just hormones, is it? Acid-base balance matters too.
Hugely. Acidemia, when your blood gets too acidic, tends to cause hyperkalemia. Potassium moves out of cells. It's almost like the cells trade K+ for excess H+ ions.
Why does that happen?
Well, lower pH inside the cell makes it harder for potassium to bind to things, and it also hampers the NK pump a bit. Interestingly, strong mineral acids seem to have a bigger effect than organic acids, even for the same pH change.
And the opposite, alkalemia.
Alkalemia, higher blood pH, does the reverse. It drives potassium into cells, potentially causing hypokalemia. Even just high bicarbonate levels can trigger this shift, sometimes without a big pH change.
Anything else that shifts potassium around?
Yep, hyperosmolality. If your blood gets too concentrated, maybe from a high sugar infusion or something, water gets pulled out of cells, and potassium can kind of get dragged along with it, increasing plasma K+ life A.
Okay, so cells are the immediate buffer, but the kidneys are the long-term regulators. You said they filter a huge amount of potassium.
Massive. Around 800 millimoles a day. Way more than you eat. So clearly, the kidney has to be good at both pulling potassium back reabsorption and dumping it into the urine secretion.
And it can actually secrete more than it filters.
Absolutely. If your intake is high, urinary excretion can easily exceed the amount filtered, showing just how powerful that secretion mechanism is.
How does it work along the nephron, the kidney's filtering unit?
Well, the first parts, the proximal tubule and the loop of Henle, they mostly just reabsorb potassium. They grab back about 90% of what was filtered pretty consistently.
So only 10% makes it to the later parts.
Right. And it's in those later parts, the distal convoluted cubule, BCT, and the collecting ducts where the fine-tuning happens, totally dependent on your dietary potassium.
How so?
If you're eating low potassium, your body needs to conserve. So these distal segments switch into reabsorption mode. They actively pull K+ back.
Really hang on to it.
Oh, yeah. They can get urinary potassium down to just 1-3% of the filtered load. It's a life-saving mechanism when you're depleted.
But if you eat a lot of potassium,
Then those same segments, particularly the collecting tubules, become potassium secretors. They actively dump potassium into the forming urine. This distal K+ secretory system is where most of your daily excretion happens, and it's super responsive.
I remember reading about something called medullary trapping or recycling.
Yeah.
Sounds complex.
It is a bit, but it's clever. Basically, the kidney concentrates potassium in the deep inner part, the medulla.
Yeah.
Creates a high K+ zone down there.
How does that work?
It's kind of a three-step loop. First, some nephrons secrete K+ into the descending part of their loop, drawn by that high medullary concentration. Second, the ascending parts of the loop reabsorb K+ back into that medullary area, keeping it concentrated. Third, the collecting ducts running through there also reabsorb some K+ E, adding to the trap.
Seems counterintuitive moving it back and forth.
It does, but the purpose is key. When you need to get rid of a lot of potassium, this recycling system helps maintain a favorable gradient for secretion way down in the collecting duct. It prevents the K+ concentration in the urine from getting too high too early, which would slow down further secretion. It maximizes your dumping capacity. Pretty smart design.
Okay, let's zoom into the cells. Proximal tubule, how does it reabsorb K+ E?
Mostly passively, actually. It happens between the cells, not through them. Some K+ gets dragged along with water as it's reabsorbed, that solvent drag. Some moves because of electrical gradients later in the tubule.
So the pumps inside the cell aren't moving it from urine to blood.
Not directly for reabsorption, no. The NK pump and K+ channels are there, but they mainly help recycle potassium within the cell itself, keeping the cell happy.
Got it. What about the thick ascending limb, the TL, That's a big player, right?
Huge player for salt reabsorption, and potassium too. About half the K plus reabsorption there is still passive, between cells, driven by a positive charge that builds up in the tubulolumen.
And the other half.
That's transcellular through the cells. The main protein here is NKCC2, the NAKCl cotransporter. It pulls all three ions from the urine into the cell. It's powered indirectly by the NAK pump on the blood side of the cell.
And that's where loop diuretics work.
Exactly. Furosemide, bumetanide, they block NKCC2, stops Na plus C, K plus A, and Cl reabsorption, makes you excrete salt and water. Big effect.
You also mentioned K plus channels being important there.
Yeah, specifically apical K plus channels like ROMK. They let potassium leak back from the cell into the lumen. Seems odd, but it's crucial. It ensures there's always enough K plus in the lumen for NKCC2 to keep working. Without that recycling, NKCC2 would stall.
Okay, now the distal nephron, the real regulators, principal cells and intercalated cells.
Right. Let's start with alpha intercalated cells. Think of them as the K plus conservers. They reabsorb potassium, especially when your body is low on it.
Oh.
They use an active HK pump on the urine side exchanges H plus out for K plus in using ATP, similar to the proton pump in your stomach. Then K plus leaves the cell passively on the blood side.
And these are linked to acid-base balance too?
Yep. They also secrete acid, H+. That's why potassium depletion often goes hand in hand with metabolic alkalosis. The cells are busy reabsorbing K+, and secreting H+ Swix.
Okay, so alpha intercalated cells reabsorbed. What about principal cells?
Principal cells are the main secretors. They pump K+ into the cell from the blood using the NAK pump. Then that K+ flows passively out of the cell into the urine through potassium channels on the apical urine-facing membrane.
So the activity of the NAK pump and how open those apical K+ channels are determine secretion?
Precisely. More pump activity, more channels open, means more potassium secreted.
And the kidney fine-tunes this secretion based on various signals.
Absolutely. Factors both in the tubular fluid itself, the lumen, and factors from the bloodstream, the peritubular side.
Let's start with luminal factors. What's a big one?
Flow rate. Increased fluid flow through the distal tubule is maybe the most potent stimulus for K+ secretion.
Why?
Think of it like flushing. The fast flow washes away the secreted potassium, keeping the concentration in the lumen low. This maintains a steep gradient, pulling more K+ out of the cell. Plus, higher flow usually means more sodium delivery, which fuels the NAK pump, further boosting secretion. We call this flow-dependent K+ loss caliuresis.
Interesting. Any other luminal factors?
The electrical potential matters. If the lumen becomes more electrically negative, it pulls positive K+ ions out more strongly. This happens when more sodium enters the principal cells through their sodium channels, called ENECs.
And that connects to diuretics again.
Yep. Amiloride blocks those ENECs. Less sodium entry means the lumen doesn't get as negative, reducing the pull on potassium. That's why it's a potassium-sparing diuretic.
Okay, now factors from the blood side. Aldosterone.
Major player. Aldosterone is a key long-term stimulator of K+ secretion. It does a few things. Boosts the NAK pump activity, increases the number of pumps over time, stimulates those ENSC channels, and increases the number of open K+ channels on the apical side.
But it needs sodium.
Critically dependent on sodium delivery to the distal nephron. If sodium delivery is low, aldosterone can't stimulate K+ secretion very well, even though it's trying.
And that ties into aldosterone escape.
Exactly. If you have high aldosterone levels long-term, the body adapts to prevent too much sodium retention. Volume expansion increases sodium delivery to the distal tubule, overriding aldosterone's sodium-saving effect. Sodium excretion normalizes, but
K+ secretion keeps going.
right, because the high sodium delivery continues to drive K+ secretion stimulated by aldosterone. This can lead to significant potassium depletion over time. It shows how volume control can sometimes override electrolyte balance.
What about dietary potassium itself? How does intake regulate excretion?
Both acutely and chronically. If you suddenly eat a lot of potassium, the slight rise in your plasma K+ directly stimulates the NAK pump in those principal cells. It also triggers more aldosterone release.
And over time?
Over time, with chronically high intake, the kidney adapts. The cells get bigger, pumps increase, channels increase. Your body becomes super efficient at excreting potassium loads without dangerous spikes in blood levels. That's potassium adaptation.
And low potassium intake.
The opposite happens. Low plasma K+ directly inhibits secretion by principal cells. Aldosterone levels fall, And those alpha intercalated cells ramp up their K plus reabsorption using those HK pumps. The kidney desperately tries to conserve every last bit.
How about acid-base effects on secretion?
Generally, acidosis reduces K plus excretion. Even though K plus shifts out of cells systemically, inside the kidney tubule cells, the low pH inhibits the Neckley pump and, importantly, slams the brakes on those apical K plus channels. They barely open at low pH.
So K plus gets trapped inside the cell.
Pretty much, reducing secretion. Alkalosis does the opposite. It increases K plus excretion, which can make hypokalemia even worse if you already have it.
It seems like so many factors are interacting.
It's incredibly complex. Sometimes factors oppose each other, sometimes they add up. For example, metabolic alkalosis, high potassium itself, and using diuretics that work upstream, they all tend to increase K plus secretion.
Which explains why hypokalemia is such a common side effect of many diuretics.
Exactly. They increase flow and sodium delivery to the distal nephron, pushing K plus out, often compounded by any underlying tendency toward alkalosis.
Okay, wow. So let's pull this together for our listener. We've gone through the weeds of potassium handling its roles, the internal versus external balance, the kidney's intricate filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and all the regulation.
And hopefully, you see, this isn't just, textbook trivia. Understanding potassium balance is absolutely fundamental for clinical practice. It underpins how you diagnose and treat a huge range of conditions.
Totally. Think about the causes of low potassium, hypokalemia. It could be kidney losses from diuretics, maybe GI losses from vomiting or diarrhea, or just shifts into cells due to alkalosis or adrenaline, or even simply not eating enough.
And hyperkalemia, high potassium, most often it's because the kidneys aren't excreting it properly. Kidney failure, maybe certain drugs like potassium-sparing diuretics or ACE inhibitors or low aldosterone. But it can also be from K plus shifting out of cells in acidosis or massive cell breakdown like in crush injuries.
And knowing the physiology directly guides treatment, right? Especially for severe hyperkalemia.
Absolutely. If the ECG looks dangerous, you need immediate action. Calcium gluconate IV doesn't lower potassium, but it stabilizes the heart muscle membrane electrically, protecting it. That buys you time.
Buys time for what?
Buys time to actually lower the potassium. You give things like sodium bicarbonate, glucose, and insulin together. They work quickly to push potassium back into the cells, out of the plasma.
But that's still temporary, isn't it? The potassium is still in the body.
Exactly. Those are temporizing measures. To actually remove the excess potassium from the body, you need other strategies. Things like complexed and exchange resins, sodium polystyrene sulfonate is a common one. You take it orally or rectally.
How do they work?
They basically bind potassium in your gut, swapping it for sodium or calcium, and then you excrete the bound potassium in your stool. But crucially, these take hours to work.
Which is why those immediate shifted into the cells treatments are so vital first.
Precisely. Stabilize the heart, shift the K plus Mo, then start the removal process.
You have definitely navigated some complex territory with us today. It's a lot, but so important. Given how tightly potassium is controlled and how critical it is for excitability, what do you think could be a next big step? Maybe targeting K plus channels or transporters for neurological disorders or other therapies?
That's a fascinating thought, isn't it? The specificity and diversity of potassium channels offers so many potential targets. We're already seeing some progress, but there's likely much more to uncover there, perhaps leading to new ways to treat things from epilepsy to cardiac arrhythmias, maybe even beyond.
Something to keep an eye on. Keep diving deep into these topics. Remember, you're part of the Deep Dive family, and tackling complex physiology like this, you are absolutely capable of mastering it. We'll be here to guide you next time.